Father David, as he said, is going to talk a little bit about VBS at the announcement, but as a dad of one of the kids who was there, I would just like to take a moment and say thank you. Thank you to all of you as teen helpers, as volunteers, as teachers, as snack people, even and especially those of you who are on staff at Christ Church in our children's ministries. Thank you for the investment that you had in my son's life and the life of 400 kids this week. It was amazing to get to work and check in and check out over the week and hear kids come in and come out talking about the simple lessons they had learned. Simple words, but yet with such profound truth. My son came home singing "This Little Light of Mine." And earlier in the day, I had asked him who the light was. And he was like, I don't know. But later that night, when Mom got home, she asked, "Who is that light?" And Jackson said, "Mommy, the light is Jesus." How exciting is it to hear a 4-year-old talk about Jesus? And to hear every morning kids singing their theme song, "I will not be afraid." Over and over again, simple messages from the week that I think are going to have lasting and profound value in their lives. So thank you. It's interesting how simple messages have such lasting place in our lives. Businesses and advertising spends billions of dollars every year hoping that that is true. And to help them out, I'm going to give you a little pop quiz this morning. I'm going to say a few phrases, and I'm going to let you tell me if you know what advertising slogans these are. Here's the first one. Melts in your mouth, not in your hands. M&Ms. You can be a little bit more confident. That's good. What can Brown do for you? Okay. Here's an old one, but I think you can do it. Where's the beef? Wendy's. Y'all remember the little old lady driving around in her car? Yep. And here's probably one of the most famous and profitable. Just do it. Nike. Okay, you passed the test. The Nielsen ratings are going up in our church. Thanks very much. This passage that was just read, that Jason just read from the gospel, contains a very simple message from Jesus. But it was one that profoundly changed the life of two people, Jairus and the woman who was ill. And I think as we go along, we'll realize that if we receive this message for ourselves, it will change us, and we will never be the same. Simple words. Do not be afraid, only believe. Those words from Jesus had an impact that these two people would remember the rest of their lives. And the people around them would never forget. And those of us who have experienced these words know what they can do for us as well. What's amazing is around this story of Jesus saying these simple words, Mark interweaves two universal truths about what it means to be human. And so I want to look at those because these two universal truths will help us understand our situation and how the words of Jesus can impact our lives. The first universal truth that Mark gives us in this passage is that all of us will face moments of desperation in our lives. And the second truth follows from that. All of us will find ourselves in need of a Savior. And so I want to take a look at these two characters and see how it is that they moved from desperation to salvation in this story in Mark's gospel. The first person that we meet in the story is a man named Jairus. And Jairus is described as a leader, a ruler of the synagogue. He was kind of the worship director. He was the one who made sure things were running week in and week out in the services there. And so, as you can imagine, he was very well respected and well known in his community. And because of that, he was also probably a person of wealth and a person of influence. And in that culture, and especially in the religious beliefs of that culture, this was a sign of God's blessing over his life. If you were successful, if you were wealthy, that meant that you had God's favor, and God viewed you as a pure person. But as we see, that didn't hold true in Jairus' life. He was facing a situation that was out of his control and out of his influence and out of his power to handle. It's interesting, isn't it, how it is that even today we think people of wealth and influence and power are somehow immune from the difficulties that the rest of us experience. And then when we read about the fact that they do experience the same things that we do, we're somehow surprised. And that's happened over and over again this week. You didn't even have to read the newspapers or be on the internet to know 3 major things happened this week. The first of all is Michael Jackson passed away. Michael Jackson, who is probably one of the most famous people in the world and arguably one of the best musicians and talented musicians of his generation. I still remember gathering with my friends in middle school watching the Thriller video as it came out and simply being amazed at the work of art that it was. I was 13, I can't help it. But yet, if you look back into the life of Michael Jackson, you see in this man a man with broken relationships with his family and with other people. A man who faced addiction to drugs. And a man so unsettled with himself and the way that he looked that over a period of years went through all sorts of painful surgeries to morph himself from the way he looked into some other person that he wanted to be. Earlier in the week, you might have heard that Farrah Fawcett died. She was the beauty icon of the 1970s. I still remember as a kid my sisters trying to get their hair to feather, just like Farrah Fawcett's. And when they played Charlie's Angels, there was always an argument over who was going to get to play Farrah Fawcett's character. But despite her beauty and her fame, she too had her own relationship difficulties. And in the end, that fame and her money and her position couldn't keep cancer from eating away at her body. Finally, you might have heard about Mark Sanford this week, the governor of South Carolina. Here's a man with a beautiful wife and 4 handsome sons. Rumors were already going around that he was likely going to be the Republican candidate for president. His political star was rising. His influence was on the rise. But yet something within him was so unsettled and so desperate that he gave up and risked his family and his power and his influence and his potential to have an affair with a woman in Argentina. And we look at people like this of influence and of power and position and think, how could they ever be that desperate? How could anything like that ever really happen to them? How could they let themselves go? But we know, don't we? We're not so different as them. We recognize that power and influence and money don't really settle the desperate hours of the night. We contrast this man of influence and power and wealth with a woman who had been sick for 12 years. Unlike Jairus, she was poor. She was likely shunned by her community because she was considered unclean. And because she had been sick for so long with a disease that could not be healed, she was likely labeled a sinner. Because God obviously didn't pour out his blessing upon her, he must have found some fault within her. And like Jairus, a man of influence and renown, we don't even know her name. She was simply the woman who was sick. I think that she is the every woman. She's the every man. She is us.
To make a monetary gift that supports the ministries of Christ Church Plano, visit christchurchplano.org.